President John F. Kennedy was assassinated on November 22nd, 1963 at 12:30 p.m. while riding in a motorcade in Dallas during a campaign visit. Kennedy's motorcade was turning past the Texas School Book Depository at Dealey Plaza with crowds lining the streets when shots rang out. The driver of the president's limousine, with its top off, raced to nearby Parkland Hospital, but was after being shot in the neck and head. Kennedy was pronounced dead at 1 p.m. It is Saturday, November 26th. I'm Doug. Joining me today is my Mopar Kevin. How's it going, Mopar Kevin?
It's going good. It's been a while.
You brought your fancy car here. We should flip the camera around. Look at that.
It's been a while since the last time I was on here with you.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
Yeah,
it's been a minute.
Now you're in a spaceship up here.
Yeah.
You know I'm scared of heights, right?
No, and it's got... See, everyone's going to be able to see the background, what's really behind the backdrop there.
I like that. I like that.
What have you been up to?
Hey, well, so we've had I've listened to your podcast, and of course you've been talking about aliens and stuff, and so I want to bring you back down to earth and talk about a little bit of conspiracies down here a little bit. So talk about the JFK. There's a lot of theories out there about JFK, but the basics of that is that it's a homicide investigation. It's an open homicide investigation. I mean, they've closed the books on Lee Harvey Oswald, but a lot of interesting theories out there. Of course, Jim Garrison had his trial with Clay Bertram, who was later identified as being a CIA operative. And we're supposedly going to be able to see these files in 2029. So, of course, they keep pushing that date back, right? But let's get back to this whole thing.
Did you see JFK with Costner and all that?
I saw the JFK, and then there was a follow-up to that, which I just recently watched. I was really sad that the date came by with the anniversary of his assassination, and it didn't click in my head, and I finally realized, oh my gosh, people have forgotten, in my mind, people have pretty much forgotten that whole, but, we went through a period, go back in the Wayback Machine, Mr. Peabody, $5 of gas was filling up the tank back then. You had 3 news channels, and the news reporters like Cronkite and Chut and Brinkley, they were trusted individuals. I mean, when the news guy came on the TV, if he said the moon is made of cheese, people believed it. So here you have an assassination or a person shot, and they've lost evidence. They lost his brain.
Yeah. Yeah.
You and I both probably know there's nobody buried in this tomb because there's always that chance of him being exhumed. So they probably cremated him.
Yeah.
And you have to sit back and wonder, with all these conspiracies out there, with all these people thinking, well, it's the mob or it's this or there's a secret government. What's really sad about that whole chain of events is that the world changed, or at least the United States changed, where we became not trusting the government. I mean, we went wholeheartedly into the Vietnam War right after that. He wanted to dismantle the CIA. He felt that they were getting too powerful in what they were doing. And the whole chain of events leading up to his assassination, it was just mind-boggling. But I heard something really interesting that going along the lines with Lee Harvey Oswald supposedly doing the shooting, it was really weird. Supposedly there's this Secret Service agent that just recently passed away about 6 or 8 months ago, who supposedly confessed on his deathbed that he was behind the motorcade, and when he heard the shooting, he pulled out his pistol, and it went off, and he's the one that shot Kennedy in the back of the head.
Oh.
So.
Oh no.
So supposedly, and I haven't been able to corroborate this, but supposedly there's two different types of bullets. There was 2 different type bullets. There was the 7.62, and then there was a 9mm. But I can't.
Pistol.
Yeah, which I can't verify that. And I'm thinking, well, that would go in line if there was Secret Service agent actually did that, you wouldn't want that to come out. Yeah. But I tend to believe, I still believe the grassy knoll. I still believe that we had 3 or 4 shooters at the time. But I don't believe the mob had anything to do with this. You have a situation where You had the military that was in charge of his security were told to stand down. You have his route was changed to where he did that route that instead of going straight underneath that bridge, he made that turn in front of that park area there where he slowed down. You had all these open buildings. So in my past life, I worked for an airport, and I've dealt with 3 presidential visits. And I got to tell you, the one thing that they're very much against is any open windows or any high structures. And they deal with redundancy. And so everybody has a gun on them, even the sworn officials. And so I can't believe that they would allow this car to slow down, make this turn. You got the suppository, well, that too. The depository. You've got the other buildings, windows up, people looking out the windows. You got guys opening umbrellas, and it amazes me how this wasn't even thoroughly investigated. And it just amazes me that we've lost his brain. I just don't know how. Did you take it? No. What'd you do with it? What the heck is that?
Well, he lost
man?
his brain. Another thing is the windshield. And he was hit. If you watch the video, I've seen a lot of.
You talking about Zapruder? The Zapruder film?
Yeah. He lurches backward like he's being hit in the front.
Yeah.
And so that was through the front windshield. Well, they went to get the windshield replaced, and they destroyed the old windshield. It was instead of keeping it, it was destroyed. So
yeah, it was my understanding that Johnson wanted the limousine hurried up and fixed up and cleaned up, right away, which, I'm sure they had more than one limousine, so that could have sat over the side. The one thing that was always scary to me is that you had, the phone system went down for an hour during that time, exact time. When they went to supposedly get Oswald out of the theater, they rushed in there with a bunch of cop cars for a guy that supposedly didn't pay it. Only thing they were called on is he didn't pay for his ticket to go to the movies. That wouldn't require 15 squad cars to come to the theater. And do I believe that he was involved? Oh, absolutely. I think he was the fall guy. I think they already knew and groomed him. You have a guy, let's look at Oswald. You have a guy who renounced his citizenship during the time that everybody, if you're red, you're dead, right? So he did not renounce his citizenship. He goes to Russia. They give him a place to live, a salary.
They train him up.
He was a radar expert. Next thing you know, we got a U-2 being shot down, which is also supposed to be untouchable, right? And then he wakes up and decides, I want to go back to the United States. And we let him back in, no questions asked. Hey, matter of fact, I read someplace we even sent him the ticket, paid for the ticket. So I'm like, that's shenanigans, right? And then, did you hear about the FBI had somebody had put out an announcement that there was going to be this radical government group that's going to assassinate the president. It came in the day before, and supposedly they ignored it. And so
we've heard who you don't think did it. Who do you think did it?
I think that there was a set of shooters at the Knoll. I think it was a radical position of the government. I think that as scary as it sounds, even today, you look at how the country has changed since his assassination. We distrust the government. They do a lot of shenanigans. How about the Bay of Tonkin? That was supposedly we got attacked and started the whole Vietnam fiasco where we sent a bunch of troops over, and then we come to find out years later, it didn't happen. So
Johnson likes war.
He made a couple of nickels on that, don't you think?
Yeah, I think he was invested in the Huey helicopters.
Yeah, absolutely, and they were going bankrupt.
Yeah,
Huey was jet helicopter was the jet bells were going bankrupt and then you had one of his compadres dredged the harbor to get our big carriers in there in the Saigon harbor there. So, when Eisenhower, you've heard his speech at the end at the government complex, the military complex is getting overbearing, and there's so much money involved in that they can't take the risk of shutting it down. And if you think about, since you and I have been, and we're not young men, but since you and I have been kids, have we ever had a period of time where there wasn't a conflict somewhere in the world that we didn't have our hands in?
It's good for business.
Yeah, I mean,
is.
it just is. But to think back at Kennedy, they were forced to do the Warren Commission because people were questioning, what the heck happened. They get Warren Dallas, who Kennedy had fired.
Yeah.
Right, as a CIA director, he had fired him. I don't want anybody that I've fired from a job investigating what's the incentive,
Yeah.
And then you look at, Gerald Ford. He was on the committee and he made president, and he vowed to open up records. He never did, and even recently Trump, he said I'll open up the records. He never did, and I can't think of what would be in there that we can't see, 60 years ago.
Well, it's just like Roswell. Look, there's a lot in that they don't want us to know. They lied. They don't. And there's back then you didn't really just try in the 50s or the 40s. You didn't really just trust the government like you do now.
Oh,
we learned
even the 60s.
We learned to do that.
Well, I mean, it comes from that whole period in the 60s where both Kennedys assassinated. Martin Luther, being killed. Malcolm X. I mean, anybody that had a vision of equality and making our country go in a certain direction, they just eliminated that shit.
So you're saying the government? You think it was internal?
I think, well, with all the stuff that had to be done, the military standing down for his regular military. The bubble being taken off of so Adlai Stevenson, there had been threats against his life. De Gaulle, I believe it was De Gaulle in France, had an attempt made on his life. So there was definite people going after public officials, and then they come to Dallas, which is already a place that was against Kennedy at the time. And you remember he won the election by 100,000 votes, and which is just phenomenal. And so he wasn't well liked in the South. I mean, in the Texas area that I understand, he wasn't really. And then they changed this. I keep going back to changing the parade route. I mean, you go down this street, and then so you look at the shooting. You had the first shot supposedly ricocheted and hit some guy underneath the bridge, hit his cheek. Okay, they had the first shot. Second shot supposedly went through his Kennedy's neck and into the back of Connolly. And then you had the next shot that came, and I think it just basically hit Connolly. I think because he's got a wound in his thigh, in his wrist, and his chest.
The magic bullet.
The magic bullet, right. And then the final headshot that you said, and I agree that it looks like it comes from the front, where he's hit from the front and his head goes back. I truly, that would be the only people that could pull it off.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much of the JFK movie is true and correct. I mean, Mr. Stone, he's got his own view of things. I think that even if 50% of that is correct, it's scary, right? Yeah. But do I think the government has the ability to cover it up? Yeah, because again, I've been involved in presidential security for visits, and they leave no stone unturned. I mean, in order for us to even be anywhere near the aircraft, we had to go through their background check, and then I worked with a Secret Service agent who told me at the end of the first visit I was involved with Clinton that you've had a gun on you the whole time, and they deal in redundancy, and it has nothing to do with the fact they don't know me. It has everything to do with the fact that even the agents have somebody watching them. So how do I think that they come to Dallas, Texas, and take the top off the car and slow down and go through this now? I just it has to be, and what happened immediately afterwards? I mean, we go and go into the Vietnam War, which he was really opposed to. The CIA wanted to go into Cuba. They wanted to go in. You had the Bay of Pigs, and Kennedy says, "No, I don't want to." I think he knew that if you open up a can of worms going in there with Russia, and, the big paranoia back then was the nuclear war. I mean, everything was nuclear war. We just had the 13 days in October a year prior where we did the blockade in that. So, I think Kennedy was thinking, I need to have peace. We can't invade Cuba because the Russians are not going to be happy about that. He supposedly was meeting with Khrushchev on the side. They did have the SALT agreement, the strategic elimination of nuclear weapons.
Right.
They signed the ban on testing. Kennedy did, and Khrushchev. So, do I think he met with Khrushchev on the down low? Yeah. Do I think he made a deal during the 13 days of October? And he takes his missiles out of Cuba if we take the missiles out of Turkey, I think it was. Yeah, of course, I'd make the same deal. I mean, we have subs, we have our at the time the B-52s, we can annihilate them. So yeah, I'll take some old ass missiles out of Turkey.
Yeah.
But that all changed the day that Kennedy died, and we went into a war stance for how many years we were in the Vietnam War, and how many, 50,000 people died, and then you look at you only took people that weren't going to college.
Yeah.
So you're just killing the folks that don't have two nickels to rub together. They were having to go to Vietnam. I just don't understand that at all. I just don't. And I think getting into a non-war posture would have been detrimental to Bell Helicopter and to other arms manufacturers at the time.
Well, even today, we're, in the Ukraine, we're not directly involved, but we're, sending them, equipment that's made in the U.S. I mean, we're making money off of it.
Well,
we're, sending money there, which I don't really, I don't know where it's going. It's probably going to end up on some offshore account somewhere. But you make money. We make money every time there's Afghanistan. We made money. Lost. They don't care about the cost of American lives. The government. But it's the machine, and But my theory is, and I heard not too long ago. It was probably a couple months. There was a mob guy that came up from. I'm not going to mention which one.
Yeah, of course.
Had this guy was a wheelman for the mob, and that he brought in 2 shooters, and this guy was on his deathbed, and he brought in 2 mobsters, and then they did the hit with Oswald. There's 2 of them, and Oswald was in the tower, and I don't remember the details of all of it, but there's so many theories about what your theory, of course, is valid. And who knows though what really who knows what really happened there. I mean, it's but like you said with the security, it's similar. I hate to drag it back to UFO crap, but with Roswell
you don't hate that at all.
Yeah, I love it. With Roswell, that was kind of the first time that we ran up against, if it was true, flying saucers or whatever vehicle crashed at those 2 that crashed at Roswell. And after that, that's when we really started cracking down security-wise. This was the first major assassination, I think, wasn't it? In the U.S. We
had presidents assassinated before, but that...
In the modern era, though.
Yeah.
And so I don't think we really had the security down as tight as we think. It was tight, but like you said, how did Roswell? How was he? Was he working with the government? I mean, how was he able to do that?
Yeah, I think that it would be a far stretch to have the mob involved because, like I said, you had the cabinet. They were flying to a different destination, so they were not in communication. You had the phone system went down for an hour during that time. And then the fact that they just rushed him out. I mean, you have a homicide, and they just whipped the body out of there. And to me, anybody, I would want to know what the heck happened. I mean, but they just whipped his body up, put him in the plane, and then they had his wife, his beautiful wife, in the plane with her bloody clothes, standing next to Johnson while he's getting sworn in on the aircraft going back from Dallas to D.C. just sickens me.
Yeah,
And
they say the body went in one side and then like out the
jeez.
other side, and they hid
Yeah, I mean,
it. And,
yeah. Well, I don't believe his
you know,
body's in the grave. I don't believe that at all because there's always that chance it's going to be exhumed. I mean, there wouldn't be anything left now, but
yeah,
at that time, somebody could have.
they could still figure it out.
Garrison. I think Jim
forensics.
Garrison, although he was, Jim Garrison, it's my understanding he wasn't the most credible
Yeah,
person, but he did bring a case, which ended up being true, matter of fact. But again, if you believe the JFK movie, if you look at the jurors and they're old guys who grew up through World War One, World War Two, Korean War, everybody was patriotic. And so you're sitting there telling you that the government's corrupt, that the CIA and factions of the military killed the president in a coup d'état. It would be a hard pill to swallow back then because, like I said, you really believed your government was the best. That they were honest, they did things for the good of the people, and we know today that that's not necessarily true. And but I can understand why they wouldn't want to convict Clay Bertram as being a CIA operative because there wasn't anything really that aside from him having the different name when he was arrested, they weren't able to collaborate. But who knew anything about a CIA operative? I mean,
yeah,
I mean, there wasn't even a James Bond movie back then, man, in '63. Right?
Yeah.
There wasn't.
yeah,
So we didn't have this secret agent, man. And so so I can understand how the jury, but if you read further, after the JFK movie came out, it caused a furor, and people started to look into it again, and that would cause some changes into we need to reopen this case. But what amazes me every time I watch that movie and watch those end credits, and they say we suggest that the case be reopened, and the committee that was formed to look into the information that they had access to,
the Warren Commission.
They the information in the 70s, right after the JFK was in the 90s, they said we should open up this case and look into it again, but nobody has. And I don't know what would be so detrimental 60 years ago. Okay, so let's say we open up the files and Johnson was corrupt and he slapped Lady Bird around all the time and stuff. I mean, who cares, right? But we know that you talked about Roswell. We know there's malarkey there. I mean, Jesse comes with his son, and again, they have no reason to make this stuff up. He got ridiculed for it. So but he comes back with the material, and then he says we found a flying saucer. And the next day, no, it was a balloon. It's like, come on, man.
Yeah.
But anyway, but that was the first start of. But back then, again, you believe the government, right? And
well, I still stick with the mob theory, and for a couple of reasons. He wanted to go into Cuba. Mob had a lot of interest in Cuba, business interest, quote unquote. And the other thing is him and Bobby were going after the mob pretty hard.
Yeah. Well, Bobby, he was the AG, and definitely.
So they were on a mission to take the mob down. So
yeah, but don't you think that if perchance somebody would have told on them, I mean, the shitstorm that they would have, I mean, Bobby was already coming down on him, I mean, crazy, but you killing the President of the United States, not only would you have the LEOs after your ass, but you'd have the normal population. Who would want to do business with the mob? I mean, you killed the President of the United States. I mean, you'd have fear, but who would want to do business with you? So I don't know. I mean, it's like we talked about at the beginning of the start of the show. There's all kinds of theories.
Well, Bobby got killed too.
And Bobby got killed from a guy that doesn't remember what he did, and he says he's a Manchurian candidate, and he was up for parole, and there was some talk there. It was a few months ago that he was actually going to get out, but somebody put the kibosh to that. But and once again, there's a theory, not to get off on Bobby, but there's a theory there was 2 gunmen in there too.
Yeah.
There's supposedly there was more than 6 shots fired, so there's like bullets in the ceiling or whatever. But if he would have made president, we wouldn't have this conversation right now because we would know exactly what happened with his brother.
Yeah.
Pretty darn close. But they weren't. The Kennedys weren't perfect either. I mean, you have brothers with, you got Marilyn who just, overdosed, which not to get off on that, but I truly believe that was not her doing. I think that was a forced, I think she knew too much pillow talk, And,
yeah, she was a talker.
Yeah, so I mean, somebody, Bobby or John, which I think is perverse as hell. You got both guys with her, but she says, you know what? If you break up with me, I'm just going to tell everybody where your dirty underwear is.
Yeah.
And oh, look, she overdosed. And which is sad because what a life, right?
Yeah.
But God, that family just had, and the father wasn't a saint. I mean, the whiskey runner wasn't a saint, right? And there's some theories that he bought the election, that he was able to influence a lot of people, which happens today, right?
Yeah, it's not unlike what we're doing through today.
You have that coin, cybercoin company that donated all this money.
Is it Bitcoin?
But they went belly up. They just went belly up, but they gave millions of dollars to the Democratic Party, and now they're defunct. They lost all their money. So anyway, but. Excuse me, but
the important part, Trump's coming back in 24. Just remember.
I don't know. Let's not get off on that. We'll be struck down for that. So in my household, there, Bobby and I are very opposite. I'm very conservative, and she's very liberal. And so we joke when we sit around with our ballots going, we cancel each other's vote out,
Yeah.
And except for the propositions and stuff, we both agree we didn't need gambling and we didn't need this. But as far as the political parties, it's like...
same in this house. It gets pretty heated sometimes, though.
So, but I tried to... when she's willing to have a conversation with me, and not to get off on this election, but the thing about Trump, there's so much anger about him, but, the man did what he said he was going to do. And what I found so phenomenal is how many attacks on this man. I mean, so that just tells me you're doing something, right?
Yeah.
If he was, inept and like our current president not running on all 8 cylinders, they wouldn't mess with him, right? But he goes in there, he shuts the border down. I'm going to put a wall up, and the thing about that is that I have nothing against immigration. None of us are natural except for, the few indigenous people that were here. So we're all a melting pot. But there's people that apply and spend years trying, and they're so proud of when they become a citizen, right? But a guy walks in off the border, and again, getting into another conspiracy, it's because supposedly we're not making babies anymore. So the labor force is dropping down. So we need people to come in and do the lettuce picking. I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but the menial tasks that it's like today we can't get anybody to serve burgers anymore.
Well,
right?
my kids aren't going to be working in the fields.
So they want these influx of people. My thing is that's fine if they want to come here and work. Beautiful, perfect. But the government then starts handing them a phone and here's medical, and we can't afford that, man. You and I can't afford doing that. But again, we're going to get somebody calling us in or sending us nasty notes. But I think that Trump, if I was a betting man, he's not gonna get the nomination. I think the Florida guy will probably get I can't think of his name right, but it doesn't matter. You guys all know who I'm talking about. My sister hates him. DeSantis, more than likely he'll get the nod. I don't believe Trump will. And now my wife will say, well, if he gets in again and if he starts stirring the pot, they're just going to eliminate him. And you guys take that out of it. I don't want to.
Is that your wife's theory?
Well, again, we go back to Kennedy. I mean, he was going against the grain, and for whatever reason he was killed, whether he was pissing the mob off or pissing the secret government off. Somebody wanted him gone, and that level of position to be able to do that. We've had an assassination attempt. We had Ford. You had a little Squeaky Fromm tried to do Ford. But that was in a crowd and that type of thing. But that was just because she's a couple sandwiches short of a picnic basket. But Kennedy's assassination was more politically motivated for whatever reason, whether it's the mob or whether it's it'd be easier to think of the mob than the government. It wouldn't be as darn scary.
But he was eliminating their interests and them. I mean, and it was getting ugly. So, I'm not saying that's it, like I'm not saying that. No. Oh, that's the one. That's the one. You know, because even with UFOs, I'm not even that fanatical about it. You know, we talk about it every week, but we don't know. We don't. There's all this. Could be mass hysteria for all I know.
Well,
You know.
so they treat us. So the powers that be that have all this information treat us like little kids, right? So
Right.
I think that they're slowly giving us. We pretty much know that there's. They don't even call them UFOs anymore. They call them
UAPs.
yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
And I think they're slowly giving us again. They're treating us like kids. I'll give you a little bit of information. See, and I don't. I know that
It's like COVID.
religion.
It'll be over in 2 weeks. Don't
Oh,
worry
God,
about it.
yeah.
Remember that?
So religion would take a shit, if they came out and said and I'm thinking, no, it wouldn't, because somebody had to make them too. So if you believe in a God or a great spirit, it would be ridiculous that he's made, if you believe in that, he made the cats, he made the dogs, he made the frogs. Why wouldn't he make another species on another planet? So
we have a follower in Florida, Terry. He just Terry came on. He was on. Well, we did an interview with Terry. If you haven't listened to it, you should check it out, because we did a recorded phone interview, and he goes to church. He's a Bible belter, and he goes to church, but went out in his backyard, and he filmed the UFO on his phone. It looks terrible.
of course they do.
I don't know if they go on fuzzy mode but it was in the dark. But he said, in real life, the thing was huge and it flew over. And, I said, so you go to church. I mean, you're religious. So what's going to happen if they say, I don't necessarily agree there. I mean, if people that listen to every week, they know that I think they're us from the future. Mm-hmm. I don't even think they are. I think, we were created. That doesn't upset the religious part of it, because it's us from the future. But he doesn't know. I mean, he's older than us. He's older. He does. I think he filmed it on a flip phone, or so. I don't even think he had an Apple phone. So he tried his best, but then they literally ran in the. You could hear it on the audio. They literally just ran in the house. It scared him. It really scared him. And I said, so what's going to happen if it turns out that they are extraterrestrials, and he said exactly what you said. Well, they're not going to really, they formed them too. God, was involved with them too. But, there would be, I think, and if you've ever seen Contact, I know you have,
yes,
with Jodie Foster. Remember the Gary Busey part?
Yeah.
I think we're gonna get a little bit of that going on if it happens. I mean, it's stated that we're gonna know in 2025 about what's going on with this UAP thing, and we've got a lot of we're going to the moon, on the dark backside of the moon, because the moon doesn't, it's stationary orbit. And now we launched Artemis a couple weeks ago, and we're going to see are they going to that conspiracy theory is that the astronauts saw it, aliens and UFOs, and I don't know if they saw aliens, but they saw UFOs and structures on the moon, and on the backside, of course, we don't see it.
Yeah.
So we don't know. There was a tower there. I mean, next week we're doing Bill and I are doing a segment on what's on the moon, what's really on the moon. There's a good show on Amazon that we're watching. I'll before you leave, I'll let you know which one it is, and they talk about that there's it. Or when we first put the X-15 up in the they're going in chronological order, so. Mm-hmm. When they put the X-15 up into the upper atmosphere, that's when they first started seeing them. And, and then as with Gemini, they saw them on Gemini, they saw them on Apollo, they saw them when we went to the moon. But NASA is covering up the footage and the audio. And they had one where they showed an object that was coming by the window, and they're filming it with that crappy little camera they use. 16 millimeter, I think.
Yeah.
And they filmed it. What they did is it was going very slowly and going by. Well, they compressed it to make it seem like you couldn't really see it. So that's the conspiracy with NASA's doctoring the video and the audio, and there's still, if you watch this, there's still, it makes you think that, but why, and people will say, why don't they want us? Why don't they make contact? Well, I wouldn't make contact with us either. Well, look, we're warring, people. It's just, look at us. If you look at our nation, not just the world. I'm not going to blame anybody outside the U.S. You just look at the U.S. and what's going on right now. We just talked about a couple of things that what do you call free range parenting or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, we won't even go there.
Nope, not
we
today.
don't have enough time. But I'm not. It's just I wouldn't make contact with us either. If, look at us. It's almost frightening.
Well, touching back on Kennedy, he wanted to scrap the space race and wanted to collaborate with the Russians. The amount of money that we spent, which was fine. I mean, we needed to do it, but.
But he wanted to go to the moon. He made that speech.
Well, he said, we should, but the Russians were doing the same thing we're doing. I think, and again, I was like 2-3 years old, so what the heck do I know? But so with Russia, this whole big, the red thing. I'm probably going to say this. Probably going to get somebody calling in.
We'll get a comment.
But Putin, I think, is cuckoo. He's,
great.
Sorry, Mr. Putin. I think when he started off, he was. But what Reagan did when he came up with the Star Wars, and which was bullpucky, right? And ended up having the Russians trying to create technology to keep up with something that didn't exist, and ended up going bankrupt. I think that was brilliant. I know that wasn't Reagan; it was his advisors. But and they had the fall of Russia. I think Putin wants to bring back, but the problem is that what he did for what he's doing to Ukraine doesn't make any sense to me, because you're devastating a country. I mean, you pretty much pulverized the country,
you're ruining the infrastructure.
And even if tomorrow he decides to, and then how does he look militarily? I mean, you have a small country. Of course, we're giving him technology, but my God, they can't do a gosh darn thing. And but again, that's a topic for another day. I think that I know we're getting close to the end of the time. I wanted to just close out on.
No, we've got time left.
On Kennedy.
You got a lot.
What was really funny about all this and what I read was Ted Kennedy. Now I'm thinking, he kind of ran kind of scared after that stuff. He didn't do a guy. I mean, he was a senator forever.
Who was the one who crashed the car?
Chappaquiddick. That was Ted. That was my buddy Ted. Yeah, he
crashed. What did he happen? He crashed the car.
He came off the bridge. The car was upside down. He got out of the car himself.
Was he drinking or whatever?
Well,
we surmise.
I'm sure he was. Having. But the part that it's not funny is that you leave your date in the car, and it wasn't like he was married or anything. He just left his date in the car, and he supposedly walked a mile back or what to the house to get help, and left her in the car to drown. And it's just like
what's not funny about that?
And then, but I think the part that got people upset is he was held accountable for it. It wasn't like you caused somebody to die, and
he didn't even get her out of. I don't know if he couldn't get her out of the car, or if he just didn't try and I guess he's dead.
Well, back in the '60s, nobody wore seatbelts, so
yes.
I mean, if he opened his door or eased the pressure of the water, he got out somehow, right? So whether the window was down or he was able to equalize the pressure, he just didn't take the time to get her out of the car.
He was not exactly a hero, is that what you're saying?
Well, I just think he was a piece of shit. But he got into politics and was able to be a senator for his entire life, his entire adult life. But he never did anything about his brothers. As far as I know, he never did anything about his brothers, which to me, I would use my position. So that to me tells me that he was pulled aside and said, "Look, you fat fuck, you shut your mouth, because do you see what happened to them?"
You probably don't even need to talk to him about it.
And we like headshots, by the way, and we'll lose your brain. So, of course, I don't know with Teddy if too many people would be upset about that back then, but it is what it is. But and nobody wants to even. I mean, we have these documents that are supposedly locked up in the thing, and nobody wants to go in there and dive into that and see. Somebody's got to have clearance. I mean, I don't care who it is. They say that presidents don't have clearance because they need plausible deniability. So they don't know about you. Remember Clinton came in. I'm gonna get to the bottom of this UFO stuff.
Yeah.
He didn't do a darn thing except play with cigars in the Oval Office. But and then you had Trump, and who came in and said, we're going to uncover all these mysteries. And once again, so
he was interviewed one time, and I think it's because I watched all this stuff. And he's asked about Roswell. What do you think about Roswell? He goes, it's an interesting story. And he just never said one way or the other. I don't think, who knows if they know. Like you said, I don't think they know. Plausible deniability.
I think that they don't want to know. But I never have asked you, what did you think about the story about Nixon supposedly taking Jackie Gleason to where we had some aliens?
Yeah.
And then they said Gleason was never the same after that.
Gleason was heavy into UFOs. He had built a house that actually looked like a giant second floor. Looked like, I think it was in New York somewhere. And that's where he took, did you say Johnson? Was it Johnson?
No, it was Nixon. Nixon took him, yeah.
Yeah, that's right, Nixon. So Nixon, I did hear the story, and then he said he was never,
he was never the same. He said he was never... and according to Gleason's family, he said, "I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to." I mean, he acknowledged that it happened to whomever he told, family member told, but he said, "I don't want to." And it, so do we have? And this was in Florida, which I don't know what the hell. My theory about Area 51 is I don't believe it really does anything. I think that's watch my hand over here while I'm doing stuff over here.
That's kind of our thing that we've relegated ourselves to. That. More than likely it's Dugway, Utah. We're thinking that's the new Area 51. It's gigantic. It's the size of Rhode Island or something. Yeah. It's so huge. I mean, it's just a massive piece of property, and there's been talk of, there's actually aliens underground in there somewhere or whatever. I mean, that whether they were here before we were here.
I think maybe Area 51, maybe at one point it was Skunk Works were working out of there, but I find it, it always cracks me up. Who is the, the work there that you're really pumped on? Lazar, yeah. Yeah. He worked there and did reverse.
Yeah, he did reverse, the story is, he did reverse engineering, but the pay stub he has only prove he was there a couple of weeks. Oh. He wasn't able to get his total security clearance because his wife was having an affair with her flight instructor.
Oh my God, I didn't hear.
Oh my God. He was involved with Robert Bigelow with Bigelow Aerospace. Yeah. And then, Bigelow, I'm not a huge, I think Lazar tells a good story, and it doesn't change, which makes this, I don't know if you heard the Joe Rogan, Bob Lazar
You told me about that, but you were really pumped on that.
Yeah, and as time went on, I moved all my books, and now I can't find them. So as time went on, I'm kind of leaning toward the fact that he did work there. I'm not sure exactly what he was. I don't know if he didn't have the full security clearance to be, given access to what he said he had at S4, which was outside the Area 51. So I'm not quite convinced that I think he was there. EG&G was the contractor that was allegedly doing the reverse engineering there. And I love the story. I love the stories he tells. Mm-hmm. And I love his story. But is it true? Not altogether, I don't think.
Wow, that's because the last time we talked about it, you're mentioning it.
Yeah, becoming less enthusiastic about it as time went on because of different things that have come to light with the area. But I do agree that they moved it. So I think back in the day it was.
Yeah, I think
it was really secret. You could hide stuff, but now people there's people all around it all the time.
All the time.
All trying to get in.
Has anybody ever tried to fly a drone in there?
I don't know.
I mean, that'd be interesting. I mean, what's the worst that could happen?
Yeah, they say the flying saucers that they have 4 of them or so in there.
Yeah, you mentioned in the back, you have some hill that opens up.
Lazard was able to he would. They took a camper or something. They went in an area where they saw this thing take off, and do these weird maneuvers. And that's the only thing that leads any kind of credence. I don't know. Maybe he had access to the schedule, but it's weird. Yeah, they do it at the same time. It's like they do it at the same time. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. It's not like an airline schedule. It's probably a Janus flight, flying from Vegas in there or something.
Well, as much as I understand about security clearances, which is little, when you're going through the process of doing the background stuff, you might work, but your access to information is going to be limited, right? So I can't see them hiring him off the street going, hey, there's a flying saucer. Yeah. Oh, gosh, you didn't pass your background.
Right there. That's when I
go home and take care of your wife.
As soon as that came to light, and it was corroborated by several sources. So when that came to light, I said he didn't see anything, or he may have overheard something, but they're and they're departmentalized. I mean, when you do reverse engineering, there's different people that, there's propulsion and the guidance.
It's all need to know.
So nobody talks. You're not allowed to talk. He had a partner in the lab allegedly, and they would go to the break room, and they wouldn't be able to sit with anybody else. I mean, all that's public. All that's typical. It's not. That's not unusual for.
So getting back to Kennedy, do you think that there's a possibility that he was so enamored with putting a program together to go to the moon in a 10-year period when we couldn't, at the time that he made that announcement, we couldn't even get a rocket to work. The Atlas was just.
The Atlas V.
My God, the Atlas! I mean, they didn't use Atlas for John Glenn, but the first astronaut, Shepard. I mean, he took his life. There was it was a 50-50 chance. 50-50 chance he was going to. I mean, they had not had a successful, and the only reason why they wanted to get going is because of Russia, and then when Freedom 7 took off, of course, he supposedly saw lights. Yeah. And they said, "Oh, it was just your heat shield falling off." It's like, okay, whatever. But I think that maybe Kennedy knew something that we needed to. He might have been privy to Roswell or something that said that we need to get a little more on the ball with this stuff.
The other theory, there's another weird theory you're going to love, is that with Marilyn, is that he told Marilyn about that.
Oh, really?
We had UFO and aliens. He told Pillow Talk.
Pillow Talk's a bitch, man.
Never divulge any secrets, Kevin. Don't ever
Marilyn,
talk about that.
Oh, Marilyn, there's a UFO.
There's UFOs and aliens. And we dissected them.
Oh. Well, you know what? I think that if you had an intimate relationship, with a president, I mean, certainly if you and I had a kin with, wouldn't you ask? I mean, if I was Biden's grandson, I would sit down there and say, let's have a bourbon out back. Tell me. I'm not going to tell anybody. Tell me.
I'm not going to tell anybody.
But I think. But
never.
But I don't think that they give him a lot of information because, again, they have to be able to stand up at the lectern and say, "There's no such thing as UFOs," And
there's a society that's above them, CIA or whatever.
I believe it. Yeah. That shadow government. I believe
it's above presidential. We always assume that the president's right there at the top. He's not.
No, he's the president has
a figurehead.
Minimal. Yeah, he has minimal. Yeah. And we see by, and again, people will probably write in or whatever, but we can see what happened with Trump. Trump went against the grain. And the thing that really stood out to me, and I don't know if you remember this or not, but when he did one of his State of the Union addresses, and Pelosi tore up his... Yeah. That, to me, spoke... I mean...
Yeah, that was volumes there.
If you and I are both in management. I mean, if we disagree with our boss, we're not going to do that in the mass, right? We're going to go behind closed doors and say, look, I think you're full of baloney. So, but you're in basically the government church. A church. I mean, that's basically a government church. And you're going to tear up... I mean, if I was a foreign government, I'd go, oh, shoot, now's the time for us to attack. You guys are screwed up. The only thing that saved us back then was, I think Trump's a little cuckoo. Yeah. But that's okay. I mean, if you're on the edge like that, I don't think Putin would have done the stuff that he did, because I think Trump would have called him up on the phone and said, hey, look, dude, let me tell you something right now. Because they wanted, Ukraine wanted to be in NATO, but what people forget is the reason why they wouldn't let him in NATO is because they got a corrupt government.
Yeah.
So they said until you clean up your stuff, you can't be in NATO, right? So even today they've petitioned to be in NATO, but it's like you talked about the arms and the money we're sending over there. I was reading an article that said that we buy this equipment, but we don't know where the hell it's going. I mean, it
Right.
gets shipped over there. They could be on the black market. It could be whatever.
Yeah.
And but what cracked me up was I was watching an interview with Biden, and he indicated that we sent him this rocket they wanted. There was a 9-mile rocket and a 16-mile rocket. He says we only give them the 9-mile rocket because we don't want them bombing, Russia and stuff. And it's like, do you sit down there with a menu going, okay, send them the Lars rockets and the M16s and the
Yeah.
and the drones, but don't give them that long range stuff because we don't want them nailing to. But the whole thing, I don't think Putin would have done what he did. But what was really telling about all this, and again, we got off on a tangent. What's really telling is his military couldn't do a darn thing with a ragtag government.
Yeah.
And of course, an occupying army always has a difficult time. But they're getting pushed back.
Yeah.
We're talking about Russia, which is supposed to have an equal military compatibility. The reason why we had nukes in Turkey and that was because they had tanks and tanks and tanks. It's like China. They don't need nukes. They'll just give you 500 million screaming Chinese men to come after your tail. So they
Yeah.
don't need nukes, man.
Yeah.
We have nukes because we don't want the 500 million screaming Chinese to come after us. But what's happening with Ukraine, I think, is a good indication of why China hasn't gone after Taiwan because they're looking at this. Now, Taiwan, we do have to protect. And so, you and I have talked about World War III and Armageddon and stuff. That's World War III right there.
Yeah.
That's because what'll happen is we'll send a carrier into the straits, and then they'll get it. If it gets sunk, that's it.
Yeah.
You and I will be doing podcasts from a basement somewhere. For anybody that's
Exactly.
left, is there anybody out there? We'll do the Skynet looking for the Terminator to come. So, but anyway, I think that we kind of got off on a tangent there. But I think that's why Kennedy was really forcing. We didn't have we weren't spending money in military, so why didn't we divert it towards the space race, right? And my father was involved in manufacturing, and we talked about it. He worked for Lockheed for a time. He worked for United Aircraft, which
Was he in Travis?
So he was at Alameda, and he was there for quite a while. Then he did consultant work. He went to Lockheed in we lived in Colorado, and he went and did some consulting work at a aerospace. I think it was Lockheed. Then he, for some reason, and I don't know why to this day, he was asked to go to Boeing. So we went to Washington. He was at Boeing for a short time. Then he came back to Lockheed. His last gig was for United Aircraft, which did consulting work for the strap-ons for the shuttle. And they actually, so up in San Jose, I don't know if you know this or not, but they have a complex up in the mountains behind San Jose that actually, I don't know if it's still there, but they did it at his time, where they built these strap-on tests, and they would shoot these rockets off. Pointing up, obviously. And I always asked, when I got old enough to ask, I said, "Can I go?" And he said, "No, you can't. You can't go." But
They pointed toward the ocean. So
they pointed straight up. It's in the mountain. It was in a bowl in the mountains, right above San Jose.
Yeah.
And it was United Aircraft, and it was called United Technologies.
Yeah.
And so his involvement, sorry to say, was he developed some type of a jig to hold these missiles, and so that's how he was involved with that. Brilliant guy with math, but he couldn't spell breakfast to save his life. So.
No kidding. That's interesting.
Yeah, but that was
his
his
slide
thing.
rule, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. You know what? I mean, like I said, I tried to understand algebra. That man would write equations, and I'd look at it going,
Yeah.
that looks like chicken scratch. But anyway. So I think that's why Kennedy was pushing towards the space program. It's like, we don't have money to spend on military. We stopped building nuclear bombs. We're reducing our military. Let's focus on the space. Let's give jobs and a goal for America that we can, because why else would he sit there and say in 10 years? I mean, again, we didn't have a rocket that worked. We couldn't even get up suborbital. And we're talking about going 250,000 miles.
Yeah.
With no computer folks, you guys listening, your cell phone has 10 times more than the
computing capacity.
Yeah,
Yep.
I mean, they had nothing, and they're going 250,000 miles with so many variables, and I was just reading an article not too long ago about the issues with the space station and the meteors.
Micrometeorites. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, it just takes one pinpoint and to permeate and they're always nervous about that.
They haven't ever had that happen.
I think I heard that they've had issues. I don't know if it's caused by meteors.
They have these little patches your waterbed.
But they say that the thing is 20 years old now.
Yeah.
We're
getting ready to exit that thing, I think.
Yeah, and they're just going to crash it.
That's all we can really do. It's kind of like the Chinese. They're testing their rockets. And the rockets come up, and then they do their thing or whatever, and then they just go down. They got a picture one next to it. Is generally supposed to fall in the ocean, but they got one that's like just looked like a yard dart, old yard dart that just hit inside the street. Yeah, I said they'd have no concern about their people at all.
No, gosh, no. I mean, when we were doing the space race, they were doing space race, and so were the Russians. And Russians finally said, "Screw it, we can't even," because their big thing was their big accidents happened when they were landing on hard ground.
Yeah,
they wouldn't land they had no water to land in really. So, and they didn't want us to see their Soyuz space capsules. But China is the same way. So,
that's amazing. So why is we know the Raiders suck this year? You haven't even brought it up yet. I'm a little disappointed.
Well, I didn't want to put it on the air because then it becomes a permanent record. And I kind of like to be
everybody. I don't think it's a secret.
I'd like to be invited back. But we are going to do a little.
Now wait a minute. I have a complaint about your wife. I will put on the air.
Just one.
Yes, she says that she doesn't mention the Raiders. She usually texts me about her disappointment in their play if you guys happen to be watching the game. And she said that I got mad at her. Okay, here I just have to say.
No, she said, I think I hurt Doug's feelings.
Yeah, no, what happened was, and I said, what does she talk about? Because I usually don't give a shit. And I had to record the game. I wasn't at home.
Okay.
And she texted me about something about the game, and that's when I comment. I think she misconstrued. It wasn't that I was mad at her. It's just that I'm not watching the game. Don't tell me what happened.
Well, she just wanted to save you time from the
yes,
pain and agony.
Disappointment. That's it. That's my weekly. And I got to tell you, I'll tell you about the air. I had some good luck with your Niners last week during, at the conclusion of that game. So we're going to wrap it up?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me up here again.
Thanks for listening to the latest episode of the Alien Probe Podcast. We welcome comments, questions, or requests to alienprobepodcast@gmail.com. Visit us on Facebook. Check out our website, alienprobe.net. We're on Twitter and Instagram at alienprobepod. Like and subscribe on YouTube. You can find us right up in the beginning. Just type in Alien Probe Podcast. We've arranged it so we go right to the top. Look for us on the internet, Alien Probe Podcast. That again, you'll get us to the top. Thanks, Mopar Kevin.
Thank you.
Next time we'll discuss why Ford is better than Mopar.
Oh.
And then,
I'm going to cuss on the air.
Thanks to our executive producer, Robert Anthony. Dr. Bill will be back next week. He's helping us with some editing on the Terry episode.
Oh, no, Mr. Bill.
Watch the skies.